Stick with me. Intro, slow-mo montage, you dropping bombs. What's up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here, and this week we are diving into part 2 of our distance series. Now, I absolutely stand by the fact that distance is not the most important part of our game, and if you check out part 1 of this series, I dive into that just a bit more, and got me pumped to help you get some more distance as well. But for some of you, you heard me mention part 1, and you're thinking to yourself, wait, there's a part 1 to this? Probably because you may not be subscribed to the channel, so if you're not already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so that you know when parts 3 and 4 come out as well. The heart of this series is helping all of us gain more distance, and I saw lots of comments about how people couldn't throw over 300 feet to begin with. So how is this series going to help them? I want to take a quick moment to say stay tuned for part 4. We're going to talk about some basic building blocks that I had to overcome just to be able to cross the 300-foot barrier, much less add on all of these things to cross the 400-foot barrier. So I hope you're excited for that because I'm pretty pumped myself. I mentioned 3 different methods we could use to start gaining distance in our own game. In part 1, we talked about the free option of a Facebook form review. In today's method, I want to talk about an option that might be free, but also might cost you something. What's the second option I believe you can do to start gaining some distance? Well, meet with a local pro. One thing that was definitely confusing when I first started diving into the disc golf world was the idea of a professional. A professional player is someone who plays in the open division, which is the top division of either the male or female divisions in disc golf. To put it simply, these amazing players have played for cash in a sanctioned event before. That's it. Just because someone is a professional disc golfer doesn't mean that they necessarily spend all of their time traveling on the road playing tournament after tournament. In fact, the people that do that are a very small percentage of the professionals in our sport. But odds are, if you're watching this video and you have any local disc golf clubs around you, then there are professional players who are in your area and have some skills that may be a little beyond what you currently have. So I just wanted to give you a few quick methods you can use to find local pros around you to help maybe give you some lessons. The first is through Facebook groups. Once again, your local scene probably has some incredible players around you, so try to reach out and contact them. The second is to go to PGA's website and look up players and sort them by state. You can look for highly rated players in your state and see if any of them happen to be in your area. Then start asking around, seeing how you can best get in contact with that player and see if they give lessons. Which takes you to the third and final method, which is word of mouth. Ask people who are out on the course if they know of any local pros in the area, and odds are you're going to find some pros really fast because pros often play a lot of disc golf. That's why they're professionals. It just makes sense. When you approach these players, be sure you are ready to pay them for their time. Lots of people are super kind and want to help, but also it's just a kind thing you can do to pay them back for their time. You can pay them in cash, you can pay them in plastic, or some of them even prefer just bring a 6-pack and let's have a good time. Trust me, I've seen and paid all 3. So when I started thinking of local pros to my area who knew distance, there was one name that quickly rose to the top of the list. Jared Neal, aka the distance monster himself, is an absolute bomber of a player. He holds a ton of distance accolades, and when I thought about someone to teach me more distance, Jared was the obvious choice. Because Jared not only throws a country mile, but he is also able to translate and teach others how to do the same. So we met up and jumped into our lesson together. I've got pros and cons about the lesson. Pros, Jared has tons of amazing knowledge on how to throw distance. Cons, it was crazy windy that day and the audio got absolutely demolished while we were recording. As a quick recap, Jared breaks distance down into 4 things. What are your legs doing? What is your body doing? What is your arm doing? And then finally, what is the disc doing? Jared found one thing in each of these categories that I could work on so that I could start seeing some success in my game. When it came to my footwork, he felt that my X step was a little short, which wasn't causing my hips to rotate as fully as they they could. There's a ton of variance to the X step. He felt by exaggerating my first step of the X step would cause my hips to rotate back a little bit more, which would cause a more explosive transfer of power into my throw. As for my body, he felt that I wasn't rotating my shoulders as much as I could, and when I started increasing the length of my X step, my shoulders naturally followed. Which brings us to the arm, but I want to go there last, which takes us to what was my disc doing? Queuing us up for today's quick tip. And today's tip is all about disc selection. While I've been throwing these shots in the field, you'll notice that there's two types of discs I'm using, Raiders and Destroyers. But here's the thing about these two discs. Even though they're similar in flight numbers, they still fly a bit differently. And for me, I actually throw Raiders farther on average than I throw Destroyers. Yet I have Destroyers in my bag, not Raiders. Why? If I'm being honest, I just really love the feel of a Destroyer in my hand for not only backhands, but forehands as well. In an effort to minimize the number of molds in my bag, I have learned to be okay with throwing Destroyers. Sometimes picking the right disc can be the difference between you throwing 300 feet and 350 feet. Yeah, it makes that much of a difference. What I would honestly tell you is that if you can't throw a disc over 300 feet, then distance drivers may not be for you, especially if they're max weight. It's one thing to find a mold and like it and throw it because you like it. I have no qualms with that whatsoever because disc golf should be about comfort. But if you're just looking for distance, choosing the right disc could be all you need. One of my favorite drivers for people looking to get a little more distance, well, I believe the Valkyrie has enough stability that for a slower arm, it's still going to be overstable, but when you start really getting a hold of this disc, you're gonna find that it flips up to flat and flies super straight for you, all about finding the right disc that works for you. I started implementing all of the things Jared told me. I felt the power come from my hips and my shoulders, and my timing was once again off because I was trying to implement new things and focus on different things in my form that I normally focus on. But wow, sometimes these shots went amazing, and other times, well, it went a little cattywampus. But here's what brings me to the best part about using this method. After the cameras were turned off, Jared and I spent even more time in the parking lot talking about what had just happened during the lesson. And that's when a light bulb went off. One of the best parts about using this method is the fact that you get instant feedback. It's one thing to send your form off to a form review group and then have to kind of figure out how to implement those changes yourself. It's another thing entirely to have someone tell you what you can fix in your form and then for them to help you implement those changes. So what was this new thing Jared and I discovered in the parking lot? We realized that when people throw really far, they have a second gear or second point of acceleration that they hit once the disc comes into the power pocket. What the Facebook group was describing as leading with my elbow, and what Jared himself even tried to describe as throwing my elbow, meant that when the disc came into the power pocket, I tried to accelerate again, which caused more rotation and power to go into the disc and also created an extremely smooth release. Trying to accelerate that late into the form as opposed to trying to accelerate from the start of the throw, this late acceleration is something I believe everyone can implement into their form, and let me tell you guys, it made a phenomenal difference in my distance. So after spending a week heading to the field multiple times trying to implement these changes into my form, my average distance before my lesson with Jared was, I still feel super impressed with this, but wondered what a difference this late acceleration and increase of hip and shoulder rotation would do to my average distance. Well, I'm happy to say that my new distance average is... It's unreal to think that this is an average, meaning there were several shots that went above this, and honestly, the ones that were below this were reaching about where I started my average distance at. I can 100% say that getting out into a field with a local pro was super influential, and honestly, I don't know that I would have figured out this second point of acceleration without talking to someone that really understands distance. So I hope you can find some amazing local talent in your area and start busting through plateau. And stay tuned for part 3 because this brand new method I think is the perfect blend of parts 1 and 2. So what's it gonna be? You'll have to watch to find out. But for now, I'm gonna leave you with the birdie.